Hi, everyone. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second of our two-part event series on South Asian candidates, challenges and opportunities, where you'll have the opportunity to hear from South Asian candidates who ran for office in the 2022 election cycle about the challenges they faced and opportunities that would benefit them in the future. My name is Raghav Joshi, and I'm a first year at NYU from New York studying democracy and voting rights. I'm an immigrant that has lived in 6 countries, and I've been involved in politics and organizing in this country since 2018, 1 year after coming to the US. I work in the youth organizing and voting rights spaces, serving as a special projects director for Voters of Tomorrow, a large youth mobilization and representation organization. I am proud to also serve as a member of the Candidates Committee of South Asians for America, or SAFA, a national volunteer grassroots organization dedicated to the education, advocacy, and mobilization of the South Asian community to build South Asian political power nationwide. Since our launch in May of 2021, we have established chapters in 18 states, and through various committees and initiatives, we are striving to ensure that the voices of all the communities, identities, and faiths within the South Asian diaspora are represented at every level of government. I think it's important to contextualize our work and the progress of the South Asian American community so far. In 2000, less than 10 South Asian Americans had been elected to public office, but in comparison, by 2022, more than 225 South Asian Americans serve as elected officials at all levels of public office nationwide. However, despite the growing number of South Asians elected to office nationwide in recent years, the 2021 report found that Asian American and Pacific Islander elected officials make up only 0.9% of elected leaders in the United States, even though they account for 6.1% of the national population. In the federal government in particular, AAPI people comprise 2.8% of all elected officials. Asians are the fastest growing racial and ethnic group in the United States and are projected to become the largest immigrant group by 2055. We have made great strides as a community, but needless to say, we have to keep on working. I approach my work with a youth and future-oriented lens, and I call on everyone on this meeting to do so as well. Engage with young people, especially South Asians, and run for office with the intention to uplift young people in the process. Tonight's event is brought to you by the Candidate Endorsement and Training Committee, led by our National Chair, Anika Rahman, and moderated by Shruti Bhatnagar. I'm now honored to turn it over to Anika, who will introduce our panelists and moderator for tonight.
Thank you so much, Raghav. I want to say how proud we are, incredibly honored we are to have you on our committee. Just as chair, I'm incredibly honored to be a part of this committee and to chair this committee. SAFA is a platform that allows me to truly live in my passion and uplift others to run for office. Our committee supports our candidates through endorsements, phone banking, and canvassing. I have the opportunity to speak with campaign managers and our leaders on the ground to support state candidates across the country. Our committee's main mission is to also inspire and uplift candidates through our training. I am excited to announce that SAFA is launching the very first ever South Asian Candidates Training Series. This is to provide candidates with better tools while also inspiring new South Asians to run for office. Finally, our committee's work wouldn't be possible without a team. I want to thank our Candidates Endorsement and Training Committee member, Ashwini Iyengar, Raghav Joshi, Neha Dewan, Samir Bunyani, Harini Krishnan, and Shruti Bhatnagar, who will be our moderator tonight. We will be joined tonight by Rishi Bagga, candidate for Florida State House, Samay Singh Kindra, candidate for Baltimore School Board, Dr. Sadaf Jaffer, New Jersey State Representative, Chandra Chouhan, SAFA Finance Committee member and former campaign staff member of Wisconsin Attorney General Josh Kaul, and Asim Thakore, National Democratic Training Committee Instructional Designer. And now I'd like to turn it over to Shruti Bhatnagar. And before she takes over, I want to briefly share a little bit about her. Shruti Bhatnagar has been a community advocate and organizer for over 2 decades in Maryland. She is the state director for SAFA in Maryland and member of the Candidate Committee. She is an elected representative from Maryland District 18 on the Montgomery County, Maryland Democratic Party Central Committee, on which she is co-chairs to the precinct organization. Shruti is an executive member of the Maryland Democratic Party's AAPI Diversity Leadership Council and chair of Emeritus of the Maryland District 18.
Recording in progress.
This meeting is being recorded.
She has led and organized several campaigns, GOTV activities, and trained hundreds of volunteers. Shruti first ran for public office in 2018 for an at-large seat on the Montgomery County Council. She has a breadth of experience and serving in leadership in several boards and commissions. Thank you so much, Shruti, and I will let you take it over.
Thank you, Anika. I am so honored to introduce tonight's first panelist, Rishi Bagga, former candidate for Florida State House. a former prosecutor at the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office, who is also a Florida Supreme Court certified county and circuit court mediator. Rishi also served as the national president of South Asian Bar Association of North America, in addition to serving as SAFA state director. Rishi ran for election to the Florida House of Representatives to represent District 35, won a competitive primary election by 57 votes, but lost in the general election on November 8th. Rishi, welcome to today's forum. I have my first question for you. Now there are no state legislators who identify as AAPI or South Asian in Florida, even though AAPI make up 3% of the population in Florida, with a substantial South Asian population in many parts of the state. Can you share with us what your journey running as a South Asian for statewide office in a deep red state like Florida looks like? What were the challenges you faced in engaging the South Asian community in Florida, especially, and what can be done to overcome them for future races?
Well, thank you so much, Shruti, and thank you so much to SAFA. I'm thrilled to have this opportunity and excited that you all are hosting this. I think this is so incredibly important for us to kind of deconstruct all of our races and encourage folks to run. It hurts me to hear that we're a deep red state, but I guess that's sort of the direction Florida's going. And so it's certainly an uphill battle, is how I would describe our campaign. It was definitely an uphill battle for me. I was a first-time candidate. As you mentioned, there's one Iranian American friend of mine who is in the legislature, but other than that, there's no Asian American Pacific Islanders. And there's definitely no South Asians, never has been any South Asians in our state government. So that is something I wanted to change. And it was an uphill battle declaring. Several people have run who were South Asian for this position in the past, but no one has been able to kind of break out of the primary system. So even when I declared, it was immediately an uphill battle. We had a really difficult time trying to be taken seriously in the beginning. I ended up running against two other Democrats, both of which had run in the past for other positions, and so they were very there were known names, and I was kind of coming in as an unknown name, and so it took a lot of pounding the pavement. My wife and I did basically everything ourselves for the first few months, without a campaign manager, without any staff, just calling up friends and trying to make sure that they could contribute where they could, and we can sort of build this thing from the ground up. We knocked on thousands and thousands of doors. We walked on numerous places, and eventually we sort of built a coalition for ourselves. And in that very competitive three-way primary, we ended up winning our primary by 57 votes. So that was it was within just outside the margin of a recount, and it was an incredibly competitive and crazy time. Once we won the primary, we then moved on to the general. The general was even more difficult because I don't think it's a secret. I think everybody knows that the Florida Democratic Party has been going through a lot of restructuring. And so we were kind of, in it by ourselves. And so, again, we felt like we were all on our own. We didn't have state party support. The state party didn't give us any money at all. In fact, we had to pay the state party some money just to get access to certain voter tools. We worked really hard, raised about $80,000, but I was running against a Republican incumbent, even though we're in a Democratic-leaning area, a Republican incumbent that had spent maybe $5 or $6 million in negative attack ads against me. So you couldn't turn on a TV or watch YouTube without an attack ad against me for about 3 or 4 months. So that was certainly very challenging. And I think what ended up the reason we ended up losing, even though we're in a slightly Democratic leaning area, which is an east part of Orlando, and our district is about 8 to 10% Asian American. So actually a group that we anticipated we would do very well on. Ultimately, it was not just us who lost, it was Democrats throughout Florida. And I think it was low Democratic turnout, which hurt us the most. And I would say it was kind of the DeSantis effect. He is a large presence. And I think everybody knows, regardless of where you live, he's become a national figure. And so when you have somebody like that running at the top of the ticket, and there's not a lot of excitement for the Democrat on the top of the ticket, we just didn't have the Democrats turn out that we think we would, and ultimately it hurt us, and so we were a couple of points down in winning. And again, it wasn't just our race; it was across the state. Democrats, even ones who were in safe districts, lost to Republicans, and it's just because we didn't have the turnout or the infrastructure to drive that turnout. To the South Asian community in Florida specifically, I'll say this. Let me hit the bad first. I mentioned to you that, we're a state that has never had South Asians in our state government. And so our state government's been dominated by Republicans for a very long time. A lot of influential South Asians within Florida kind of naturally give money to the Republicans. I don't know if it's because of a strong incumbency advantage. I don't know if it's because they feel like they got to keep the person in power happy. I don't know if that's just, where they fall or, in their personal alliance. But we had a really difficult time trying to crack into a lot of those donors who very regularly give to the Florida Republican Party to get to support us. And that actually really did take a lot of work. And there was a lot of reluctancy also because of the attacks against me. Again, I'm a former prosecutor, but they kept saying I'm going to let all the prisoners out of jail. I mean, all kinds of just crazy stuff, was being brought up. I was going to let all the immigrants in through the borders, even though the state legislature has nothing to do with that. This was the kind of attack that was just a constant drumbeat. But let me tell you the good, because I think the good really outweighs here. We had so many South Asians who jumped right on board, and it made all the difference. We won our primary because of that. The Democrats who are South Asians, they jumped on board right away. They supported us all along. We outraised my two primary opponents significantly because of the South Asian community. We had awesome South Asian, students from our universities who are really, there and happy to help us, to support us, knock on doors with us, wear our T-shirts around campus. I mean, these things really were awesome, and it was because of our South Asian community. So, the only opportunity, since you asked, that needs to be overcome, is I really think we need to make sure so many South Asians who have an eye for politics are paying attention to what's happening at the national level. And I think it really is incumbent on us to make sure they understand how important state politics and local politics are, and that they need to be engaged in those issues too. They need to understand those issues too. It's not just what's happening at a national level. You need to know what's happening in, your school district. You need to know what's happening in your state legislature, because it affects you, potentially more than what's happening at a national level. And so I think it's really important for folks to understand that. So I think that's our biggest opportunity is go out there, speak to your uncles and aunties, make sure they know what's actually happening in the state legislature, because sadly, my beloved state is in the news a lot these days because of what's happening in our legislature, which isn't currently in session. And so much of our community just doesn't know what's happening and how that affects us. So I think that really is something we need to work very hard upon. Shruti, I think you're, there you go.
Rishi, thank you so much for your insightful words. And let me just say that, congratulations for the amazing campaign that you ran, because you're so right. Every challenge creates opportunities, and just being able to mobilize our South Asian community and the way that 57 votes, wow, right? So, it's an achievement, an accomplishment. We are so proud of that. So thank you for that, and continue on the journey. We are rooting for you. And thanks for being with us today for the panel. I might come back to you later again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Shruti.
Thank you. Next, I'm honored to introduce my fellow Maryland Democrat, Samay Singh Kindra, former candidate for Baltimore School Board, a student of Baltimore County Public Schools who went on to attend the University of Maryland and Carey School of Law. Samay has previously worked for Senator Cardin as well as the Maryland Democratic Party. Samay ran for election in 2022 to the Baltimore County Public Schools to represent District 4 and lost in the general election. Samay, welcome to today's forum. My question for you, So glad to have you here. Please share with us your experience in navigating your race as a Sikh American and as a person of color in a hyper-polarized climate. How did you engage the youth and the South Asian community in particular? And what can we do to ensure that more young people like you run for local office?
Gotcha. Thanks for the question, Shruti, and thank you all for putting on such a great event. And like Rishi said earlier, I think it's such an important opportunity for us all to talk about the challenges we face, the ways that we came over some of those challenges, and really how we can build as a community to make sure more of us not only run but win in these races. So really, to sort of start addressing your questions, I think I have to start from sort of the beginning of how I got involved with all of this. So as Shruti said, I'm actually wrapping up my last semester at Maryland Law right now. So I graduate in May. So I'm still new to all of this in the sense that I just got started when I was in high school. So I've only been at it for about 7 or 8 years now. Really serving in any position where I saw that I could be of value, where I thought I could bring something to the table. And this all started, as Shruti mentioned, when I started as an intern in high school for Senator Ben Cardin, really just sort of out of the blue. I mean, I had to find an internship my senior year of high school. I didn't get a security clearance. I can only guess as to why, but I didn't get security clearance for another internship that I was lined up to do. And so I sort of applied around, and I had this general interest in politics. And that's how I got into it, just sort of pushing and saying, I kind of want to work at a senator's office. Seems like a cool place to be and to do some community work. And really, I start there because my journey almost ended there. And I think it has to do with that last part of your first question about sort of this hyper polarized climate and being a person of color. So when I was at the senator's office, I was also a page in the General Assembly of Maryland. As Shruti said, also was at the Maryland Democratic Party. And then all that sort of happened within the first year and a half of me getting involved in this stuff. Again, I was maybe 18 years old. And I quickly became disheartened, not because of what I felt my ability was, or not because I didn't enjoy the work or believe in the values and principles I was bringing, but because when I walked into rooms, I never saw anyone that looked like me, anyone. And at a certain point, I remember in particular, when I was working for the state party, and I'd go to a lot of different fundraising events and different political events, and really all I was recognized for was, oh, that's the young kid with the turban, right? There was no recognition beyond that of the work that I was doing or sort of the ideas or principles I was bringing to the table. I was just sort of a token based on how I looked because no one else looked like me. And in that moment, I almost thought, you know what, maybe this isn't for me, right? Maybe even though my heart is in this, maybe there's just not space for me yet. Maybe this isn't where I'm meant to be. Luckily, I had some really great mentors who pushed me forth. And really from that moment on, it became my mission that no matter what I accomplish or don't accomplish in this space, I at least want to continue this work so that other folks who look like me, who look like us, don't feel that in the future, that they don't not see themselves. Sorry, the double negative, I hate that, but that they don't not see themselves in these spaces, right? I want people from our community that when they walk into rooms, they feel comfortable. They know that people before them have done this, and that it's not impossible just because you don't see a bunch of us sitting at your table. And so that really trickled into the campaign. So I've served on the Central Committee in Baltimore County, a number of boards and advisor groups, campaigns, that sort of deal. And really, I didn't think I was going to run. As I said, I'm finishing up law school. So when I started this, I had just started my second year of law school. I was 23 at the time, 24. Really, like I knew at some point I liked public service and I wanted to run. I had no intention of running this young, but things sort of opened up with the school board, and there was an open seat in my district, and I got a lot of encouragement from a lot of folks who I knew who had seen my work, who thought, you should run for this. And the first people I actually asked after, of course, talking to my parents was my old teachers, my high school teachers. I went back to a lot of them and said, hey, what do you think needs to be fixed in the school system? What do you think we can be doing better for our students? And after all, we would have a conversation. I would ask them, well, candidly, do you think that given my experience, knowing what I do, could I effectuate that change? Could I actually do that on the school board? And, they had some great words of encouragement. So after all of that, I decided to run. And going into it, one of my biggest apprehensions was the fact that I know how I look. And I think this is just a point that has to be said. I think, Rishi alluded to it without saying it directly. No matter where we run as South Asians, right, we're always going to be the other. Right. And I always knew that in the back of my mind. I knew, like, to my knowledge, not a single electoral district in this country where it's majority South Asian. Right. So that means that no matter where we run, we are going to be the other. Right. We're not going to be the majority demographic. in that district. And that's a reality that I knew, but I don't think I really appreciated until I was in the race. And what you really notice is that is what people notice first, right? No matter the answers that I gave at a forum, no matter how many specific direct answers I gave about the challenges we're facing, inevitably the question in one way or the other would come about of how do you plan to represent these communities that don't actually look like you, right? How are you only going to represent the South Asian community? And they weren't always asked that directly, but those are the questions that people want to ask you, and so they ask about it in different roundabout ways. And I think that's something I had to learn to adapt to, because at first it is off-putting. And as a person, right, at the end of the day, even though we're candidates for people, and so we feel that. I felt that, and I felt that pressure, and I felt uncomfortable in those situations. But I really had to adapt past that to make sure that, look, like what we have to show is that for me personally, I was born and raised in this community. And I think that's so important for a lot of us, is people sometimes when they look at us don't think of that. They don't realize that we were born and raised here, or we've lived here our entire lives, that this is our community. This is my home. And unfortunately, we had candidates in my race who tried to make that an issue, right? They tried, even though I was born and raised here, they had no need to say it, but they would make very clear that they were born and raised here, right? If I didn't get the chance to say it first, right? So there's all this subcontext that you notice when you're running as a candidate and you're the other in the race. And I think getting over that was something that I really had to navigate. And really the way I did it was just by sticking to my principles, because I knew that if I stuck to the principles that I believed in, if I stuck with the mission that we believed in, that we would win. And we did. We didn't win the general, but we had a very close primary. I don't know if it was 57 votes, but it was a couple hundred votes, but it was still a close primary, but we came through it. And that really was validation to me that really, no matter what people may think in this hyper polarized climate, especially when it comes to different ethnicities and races and how we look, at the end of the day, if we connect on the basic principles that we believe in, if we connect on our ideas and our morals, that's what people need to see. And that's how we can connect with folks who don't look like us and maybe do look at us with a bit of skepticism, because not a lot of us appear on their ballot, at least not right now. Hopefully that changes. So that's the long-winded answer to your first question about dealing with race in this hyper polarized climate. It's not easy. It's not comfortable all the time. But really all that we can do is stick by our principles, our morals, and make sure that we're doing what we can to connect with folks who don't look like us, because inevitably that's what we have to do to win. Like Rishi said in his district, I think he said it was 8 to 10%, in my district, it was even less than that. So we can't just win if only South Asians vote for us, right? So we have to get over that barrier. It's tough. If we had the answer for it, I would be on the other panel, but I'm here, right? So we gotta keep working on it. We gotta find answers in how we do that and how we can connect better with communities and sort of make people know us for our morals and our values and beliefs, and not just what we look like. Now to go to your second question about sort of the youth and South Asian community in particular. This is really awesome, because I was thinking about this and I almost laughed because I thought of how my campaign started. And I think it really comes down to leveraging the skills and values that we have and abilities we have as a community. So I don't know if anybody on this call was recently in college or went to school in the US recently, but there's a really great Indian dance circuit in colleges now. And when I was so I was involved with that when I was an undergrad. I helped direct one of the competitions at Maryland. So a lot of my friends were in that space. And what that meant was I met a lot of great photographers and videographers. I met a lot of great people who did social media work. I met a lot of great people who did website development stuff for the competitions. And so my website was built by someone who built websites for dance competitions. Videography and photography were both done by guys who I had met in the dance circuit who did photo and video for dance comps. They did our photo shoots, right? Our social media was done by a friend of mine who ran social media for a bunch of the teams on campus. So there's so much ability and skill, especially with young people in our community, that if we can learn to really leverage that, right, in sort of not typical ways. Like none of these people that worked or that helped out had any inkling of interest in politics, but sort of from my experience, I knew these were key things to run in a modern campaign, and they have this experience. It might not be directly in politics, but they know how to do these things. We as a community know how to do these things. And so I think really engaging in our community in a meaningful way where we're utilizing the skills and resources we have. Another, especially in Maryland, we have a really robust, South Asian business scene. And that's something that we have to embrace, right? That's a strength of our community. And so, what that meant was we had places to hold fundraisers, right? We raised north of, I think, 75 or 80,000 for a school board race, which was unheard of. And that was only possible because we leveraged the resources we knew we had as a business community, right? We knew that we had venues that we could, use for fundraisers and get in-kind contributions. These are all things that we have to think of politically, right? Because usually when we think of our business culture, and especially the older generations, you don't think of it in how can we leverage this in sort of a political way to raise our voices, but there is a way to do it. And so I think utilizing just all of our resources and skills from across the generations is really great. And then about the last question about just ensuring young people run for office, it's tough. I underestimated it. I think I would not change a thing about what we did. I think we couldn't have run any harder of a campaign, but it's harder than it appears. And I think one thing we really have to do is make sure that we're getting people, young people, into the scene as early as possible, not just running for campaigns, but the reason that we were able to run the kind of campaign we ran was because I was involved in sort of grassroots local campaigns before this. So I, knew sort of the basics of a campaign and such. And I think it's really important that the next generation starts getting into that earlier and earlier, right? Like I was the only high school volunteer in a lot of these campaigns who was South Asian. If we get kids involved in high school, we're sort of building a pipeline of young South Asians who not only run for office but can help other South Asians run for office. So I don't want to take up too much time, and happy to answer any more questions or anything that come up. But thanks again for having me tonight.
Thank you, Samay. I'm so inspired by your candidacy, and I'm sure that it's going to motivate other young professionals joining us tonight to run for office as well. Representation matters, and taking that first step is huge. So thank you for taking that first step and for sharing with us your journey so that we can continue to use that to motivate others. Next, I'm going to introduce member of SAFA's Finance Committee who has had diverse experiences working as a campaign staff member of BIPOC and South Asian candidates running for office, Chandra Chouhan. Chandra has previously worked on the campaigns of Wisconsin Attorney General Josh Kaul, as well as candidate for U.S. Senate Alex Lasry, and currently serves as campaign manager for candidate for City of Madison Mayor Gloria Reyes. Welcome to the forum, Chandra. So glad to have you here with us today. My question for you is, now as important as it is for more South Asian candidates to run for all levels of office, it is equally important for more South Asians to serve on the campaigns of candidates running for office. Why, in your opinion, is this important as a young woman of color who has been part of many campaigns? What are some of the challenges unique to BIPOC and specifically South Asian candidates running for office from your lens as a campaign staff member? And what can be done to overcome them? How can we create a pipeline to include more South Asians in office and as staff members on campaigns? I know I've thrown a bunch of questions for you out there, and I'm happy to repeat them, but I'm really looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much for having me. First of all, I'm just so thrilled to be here because, Shruti Auntie, I met you and Harini Auntie last summer at the Unity March, and that day I will never forget because it changed my life. It changed a lot of things for me that I'm really excited to talk about, in this conversation. So regarding, the first question, so it's really, on the importance of having BIPOC campaign staff, especially South Asian campaign staff, is that, first of all, it really creates a diversity in thought and approach in guiding a candidate. As a young person navigating a political community that's very diverse, for a candidate of color, currently as a campaign manager, it has been very helpful for me to be able to relate to my candidate on many fronts because, one, she's a person of color, and two, she's a woman like me. So it brings a lot of diversity of thought to the table. And it's really important to be able to support candidates of color behind the scenes through the empathy that you can bring, through the shared lived experiences that you have, because you're working so closely with that person. I've developed a very strong relationship with my candidate, and that enables us to have very open and transparent conversations with one another without having misunderstandings. Sometimes, they may get heated, but that's fine, because we know that we have each other's best interests in mind. And she knows that I'm guiding her from the right place. And, if we want more South Asians on the ballot, we have to show that we have support behind the scenes for them. That doesn't just come from financial contributions, and that doesn't just come from solidarity in the community. That also comes from seeing a campaign manager who can share that identity, who's rallying that support for the candidate as well. I have to have a lot of the conversations with stakeholders and business members in the community before my candidate has that interaction with them, because I can guide my candidate on what to say and what to expect. So it's really important to have that relatable face behind the candidate as well, because people do notice that. People do notice who is running the campaign. People do notice who is behind the scenes. If they're going to invest in the campaign, if they're going to have stake in the person who's running, they want to see that support from the back end as well. I have personally struggled, I'm not running the campaign for South Asian right now, but I have struggled to rally the South Asian community because there is political lethargy. There is a sense of, there's a lack of a sense of urgency and an obligation to partake in civics in the South Asian community. It's really important that we begin to move beyond what is token representation in society, especially for South Asians. And actually a great example, a struggle that I'm facing in this race that I feel like, many South Asians are kind of victim to is they are very quick to associate themselves, based on identity and name. I'm running a campaign for a candidate named Gloria Reyes, and she's running against an incumbent whose name is Satya Rhodes Conway. I know for a fact that if my mom was voting in Madison and she didn't know anything about this race and saw the name Satya on the ballot, she would assume that that's a South Asian person and vote for them. So there is a lack of education and the drive to get people to partake in civics, to do more than just see what is on the face value and educate themselves before voting. Because Satya is not actually a South Asian person. She is a white candidate. So things like that can be misleading. In this case, especially, I know many family friends in the Madison area who have told me that they voted for Satya. They've never seen her before because they think she's an Indian person. So that is a battle that I'm also fighting. And that's ironic. It's ironic to this conversation that, that's the situation I find myself in. But it's just really important for, from the perspective of, having young people partake on campaigns. It's really important because, we have to get people to understand the importance of the back end of the process, the importance of organizing. It's in order to mobilize people and get them to become involved. It's really, I think, Samay can also say this, and he did touch on this, is that, he found himself to be the only a South Asian high schooler volunteering, or, the only South Asian partaking in organizing in college. I find myself in the same position, but working on campaigns, I have the lived experience of knowing the importance of phone banking and canvassing and some of the not exciting parts of organizing to, really put those candidates on the ballot and help them be successful. So it's really important for South Asians to get involved in the back end of, campaigning, to be able to provide that lived experience, to explain to people and inform them on why it's important for, South Asians to get involved in every area, of civics. On the second question on the challenges,
let me pause you, Chandra. Yeah. I'm going to pause you. I want you to hold on to that thought.
Yeah.
And don't let it go. This is so incredible. I love all the information, and remarks are so inspiring. But I actually want to take a pause and go to another speaker. I'll come back to you with the next question. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to introduce New Jersey State Representative, Dr. Sadaf Jaffer. Dr. Jaffer made history in 2022 when she became the first South Asian and first Muslim woman, along with Representative Shamma Haider, to be elected to the New Jersey State Assembly. Previously, Dr. Jaffer also made history when she became the first South Asian woman to serve as mayor of a town in New Jersey and the first Muslim woman to serve as mayor in the US when she was elected to Montgomery County Township in 2017. Welcome, Dr. Jaffer. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know that you are leaving another event to be with us, and we really appreciate it. My question for you is, what was your experience running as a South Asian and Muslim woman in a state like New Jersey, which has one of the largest South Asian population in the country? How did you engage the South Asian community to take interest in your race? And how can we counter the challenges that South Asian women face when running for office?
Thank you. So great to be here. Thanks for having me. I think, you know, when I ran in Montgomery Township in 2016, you really didn't see South Asian engagement in the political process. And we had a lot of South Asians in town, and people would often ask me, you know, we have so many South Asians, how come they don't come to government meetings? And I told them that if you go to a meeting and you see only people who of one race, everyone's white at the meeting, maybe you'll think that that space is not for you. And so I think just being there, being out there, knocking on doors, it encouraged other people to say, oh, I can go to a local government meeting. There certainly were a lot of challenges. I know when I won my race, my opponents wrote, you know, we lost, whatever they wrote on their Facebook. And the first comment was, oh, I was born in this country and now some Indian's gonna tell me what to do. So, you know, you hear those things and they make you cringe and they make you feel like, you know, this is a really tough situation. But, you know, at my swearing in, it was the most packed the courtroom had ever been. And again, then we started more people saying, oh, maybe I'll run, maybe I'll join a board or commission. And part of the work that I focused on when I was mayor was to diversify the people on our planning boards and our zoning boards. So I think the challenge is a lot of times you're the first person in your network who's doing this. And so you don't really know what to do. Your friends don't really know, but you learn as you go. And, you know, I think one of the things that I'm working on now is how to support women and minority candidates to avoid burnout, because we have so many things that are on our plate. You know, we need to be going to events for the South Asian community, events for the Muslim community, events for a local district. There's a lot more on our plate than, you know, the other legislators who don't have this sort of responsibility. So I think we need to create that ecosystem where we have a supportive environment. You know, I love the idea that we need more South Asians to be on campaign staff, because a lot of times I felt like some of the people who worked on my staff, especially for the assembly race, just really didn't get the South Asian community or didn't get some of my concerns. My chief of staff is South Asian American. So that is really, really a great thing to have that support. And there's safety in numbers. We need more people out there. But I know that myself and all of the other state legislators and electeds from the South Asian community are more than happy to give advice. And I actually did have a woman who's running for state legislature in another state reach out to me. And I was so happy because I felt like sometimes these questions would come up and I had no idea who to turn to. So I think, you know, we need peer mentoring. We need, you know, some sense of how to support each other. And, you know, formal training and mentorship programs are always great for minority candidates and women candidates to get to strengthen up as they decide to run for office.
Dr. Jaffer, thank you so much. We are so inspired by you and really appreciate you taking the time to join us today and look forward to having more conversations with you in the future. Thank you for your leadership and service. Next, I want to actually go back to Chandra. And Chandra, I want to give you a couple of minutes to finish your thought there. It was really interesting what you were saying. So please go ahead and wrap up your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm going to make it really quick. I think just like to address like, you know, a challenge. I think people of color often, I think what I'm seeing firsthand, second guessed for their experience and for their ability to lead. So that's like a big challenge that I'm seeing, that I'm combating, being also a campaign manager of color, is constantly having to prove myself and help my candidate prove herself when they would not have to go through that if, you know, they were a white candidate or maybe even a male candidate. My candidate is very well established in this community, but what's sad is that communities of color have actually been heavily lacking in lining up behind her. And we've had more support from Caucasian people in the community than arguably people of color in the community who have not shown up. And it's been extremely hard to rally that support. And I think, you know, to transition into combating that challenge, I think, you know, we really need to go beyond that point of succumbing to political risk as a community, and we need to unite. There's a lot of things that divide our South Asian base, and I think one area I'd like to touch on is religious divide. And I think that to transition to maybe getting more young people involved, there are many opportunities that we have that I feel like don't explore enough, such as doing GOTV events at temples, at gurdwaras, at mosques, doing workshops, bridging people together, having interfaith conversations. I find myself in a very unique place because I'm actually the founder of an organization that's nonpartisan called Chup Go Vote, that I actually started after the Unity March last summer. And I'm also a campaign manager at the same time. So I am on one hand trying to mobilize the community in a nonpartisan manner, but I'm also seeing as a campaign manager the gaps that I am, not addressing as a community organizer that I should be addressing to help it, rally South Asians behind a candidate or to get South Asians more involved. And I think the most important thing is starting those conversations at a very young age. As Samay mentioned, ironically, he touched on the dance circuit. What we've done with Chup Go Vote is we partnered with the Desi dance circuit and mobilized over 1,000 voters across the country for the 2022 midterm by, I don't want to use the word incentivizing here, but creating the drive and the motivation for South Asians to partake in civics by leveraging the strong community that can be found through dance teams, through competitions, through the spirit of culture. So I think by leveraging pre-existing infrastructure and organizations that exist in colleges, and even, making that trickle down into high schools, we can kind of build a new generation that goes beyond token representation and bringing South Asians to the forefront of civics, not just by, running on the ballot, but by being strong leaders who are promoting civic participation. And, the last thing I'll touch on is that, we really need to do a better job also in bringing together, people who can't vote necessarily. So what we're doing in our college campus at Madison is we're bringing together maybe students who are from overseas that are not citizens yet and educating them on the implications of electing candidates who will advocate for swift and smooth pathway for citizenship for them, helping them understand why it matters that you're informing your friends who can vote that they're voting for the right person, because the person on the ballot is at the end of the day affecting citizens and non-citizens just as equally. So it's really about bringing everybody together to rally all levels of support from, people in the community to campaign staff to, community leaders to candidates themselves. And it really helps to have that cultural connection. And those are steps that we can take to rally that.
Thank you so much, Chandra. I am so impressed and so inspired listening to all the work that you've been doing, your leadership, your creative ideas. And thank you for sharing all of that with us today. We need more young women like you to be part of campaigns and then use that experience to run for office. So really, really proud of the work that you are doing. Continue to keep doing that. And we look forward to working with you. Next, I'm honored to introduce the last panelist for tonight, Asim Thakore, who serves as instructional designer for the National Democratic Training Committee. In his role, Asim is responsible for creating, engaging, and impactful learning and training materials for all audiences. After working in politics out of college, Asim spent a decade working in telemedicine operations and training before returning to the political sphere with NDTC. Asim is also active in his local Democratic Committee with the Missouri Democrats. Welcome to the panel, to the forum, Asim. We are really glad to have you with us today. And my question for you is, as instructional designer at NDTC, can you please talk about the trainings that are offered by NDTC in general, and specifically the importance of training for BIPOC and South Asian candidates, especially those running for office for the first time, on issues ranging from fundraising to messaging and outreach methods? South Asian candidates bring unique stories based on their ethnic and faith identities, which can pose challenges. How do we overcome that through training?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you all for having me. Thank you everybody for being here. And I'm honored to follow such an all-star roster of South Asian candidates, elected officials, campaign leaders, et cetera. So I'm wondering if we can see some love in the chat for them, give them a round of applause. A lot of questions in there. In terms of what NDTC offers, we offer free trainings to any and all Democrats that want to either run for office, work on a campaign, or improve their local communities by getting involved in their local Democratic Party, whether that's setting it up or taking over an existing party and helping run that. We have a wealth of trainings. We have our online academy, which is available 24/7. We have virtual live trainings that are webinars. We do some in-person stuff. We sort of paused that during the pandemic, obviously. We're getting that going again. And our trainings go from the very basics to specifics. So whether that is deciding if you want to run for office and what office you want to run for, we have a training about that. We have a training on getting started and learning how to file for office, to learning how to do call time, learning how to build your first fundraising list of people that you're going to call. Chandra mentioned an amazing relational organizing program that they ran based around dance teams. We teach folks how to do that. Chandra also mentioned what to me was related to a course we have on high traffic canvassing, which is, are you engaging people where they are, which is, at their temple, at their masjid, at their gurdwara, just one of many places. For staffers, we have courses on getting a job in democratic politics. In terms of how that relates to the South Asian community and the BIPOC communities, I think that for a lot of South Asian candidates, running for office is their first exposure to politics sometimes. We talked about that on this call, that there are a lot of members of the community that are not engaged, and then someone steps up and runs. What I want people to know is that yes, politics is an art and a science, but there is a process, and we can teach the process and the science, and then the art will come. Not everybody is Barack Obama, as I like to say, and Barack Obama was not Barack Obama until he became Barack Obama, if that makes sense. That's circular, but I mean, what we all saw in 2008 was the finished article of the politician. So you do not have to be this movie character version of a politician to run for office. You just have to be bringing your authentic self to that. And part of the other question was, how do we address being South Asian in this space? And I like to talk about Marshall Gans, who some people might know. He is a union organizer. He's a Harvard professor, but he has this messaging model called the story of self. So the way that I think, and that we at NDTC think, that you talk about, what sets you apart is that has to be part of Harini. That's amazing. He was your public leadership professor. Okay, yes. I mean, you are the expert on Marshall Gans then, but he has the story of self, the story of us, the story of now. So your identity is part of why you're involved in politics, part of your authentic story, and you bring that to the space to tell people, hey, this is who I am, this is why I'm running, this is what we're going to do together, that's our story of us, and here's our story of now, this is why this is the moment. So we have a course on that at NDTC, and again, those are all free. We have courses on running in a red district. We have a giant free resource library that we are actually updating and adding more stuff to today. I spent all day just adding resources to the resource library. We have a course on equitable and inclusive campaign practices. If you are running for office and you need to hire and manage consultants, we have a course on that. If you need to hire a campaign staff, we have a course on best practices for that. Compliance, learning how to file, learning how to build a culture of compliance in your campaign. We teach those best practices. So if you need it, we probably have it. And if we don't, email us and we will find an expert in the field and we will write a course about it. So I hope that answers the questions. But if anybody wants to engage with us, I'm going to drop our information in the chat.
Thank you so much, Asim. That was really, really helpful. And hearing you and what we just heard earlier from Chandra, I must say that, we talk about running for public office. I'm serving on the Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee. And to the points that each of our panelists talked about today, grassroots organizing and having representation at every level of government, but also in organizing and making sure that we have South Asians represented on campaigns, working to bring more people into the political diaspora, working with us to make sure that more people are engaged in the political process is so important and a necessary step to run for office, but also making sure that we are changing the kind of challenges that we've heard today and that candidates continue to experience. So I just want to thank all the panelists today. You were incredible. This was such valuable information. And we really thank you for taking the time to be with us today and to share that information with us. We look forward to continuing to engage you and also wish you all the best in your future endeavors. And with that, I am going to turn it back over to my colleague on SAFA's candidate committee, Raghav Joshi, to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Shruti. Thank you as well to all of our panelists and all of you who have joined us today. As a proud member of SAFA's Candidates Committee, I'm inspired by the increasing number of South Asian candidates, particularly young South Asian candidates running for office and seeking SAFA's endorsement. It's especially inspiring to note that many of our former state directors like Rishi Bagga stepped up and had the courage to run. In addition to providing organizing support for endorsed candidates and connecting them with our national networks, SAFA is now partnering with national organizations to implement the first ever candidate training workshop, especially designed for South Asian candidates, as well as create an online hub of resources for our endorsed candidates in coalition with our partners. Stay tuned for more information about this exciting development. Additionally, if you are a candidate running for office, we urge you to visit the candidates page on our website and learn more about our candidate endorsement process. Thank you, and please continue to stay engaged with SAFA by joining our mailing list. Good night.